welcome to another episode of Preferred Walk-On, PFF's college football show. I'm your host, Max Chabnik, alongside my co-host, Dalton Wasserman, producer Eli back there. Dalton, we got our Week 11 preview, some massive games. We're covering 6 games today because there are some huge, huge games in Week 11. But before we start, we have to piss you off and talk about the college football playoff rankings that just dropped last night, Tuesday night. What were some of your initial takeaways from the second week of the College Football Playoff Committee's rankings?
I think it makes even less sense than last week. I really do. I was already going in on the top 8 last week. Texas, we both agreed Texas should have been sticks, and they beat a ranked team and still can't get above Oregon.
On a backup quarterback, by the way. On a backup quarterback. People
with a backup quarterback, absolutely. Struggling through a backup quarterback and still beating a really, really good Kansas State team, who is still ranked despite the loss. That shows you how good they played. Mm-hmm. They can't get to 6 to save their lives. I'm looking at even this entire top 25 this week, and there's just things that don't make sense to me. Honestly, again, my biggest gripe with this is you can go resume or you can go eye test, but you can't straddle it. And they're trying to straddle it still, and they were going to leave the top 8 or 9 stagnant because that's how these things work now. But there's certain things I look at here. I go, Louisville, honestly, if you go by resume, should be ahead of Penn State. Tennessee moves up 4 spots for beating UConn. I don't understand that at all. Utah gets absolutely whacked 2 weeks ago, and then they beat Arizona State, and they're still kind of lingering. I've got Iowa getting ranked after beating Northwestern 10-7. After they weren't ranked, apparently going from unranked to being actually not just top 25 token at number 25, 22, like in the rankings. You beat Northwestern 10-7 after beating Minnesota. Was it 12-10? I think it was.
Yeah, something like that.
I don't understand that. There's only one group of 5 team.
Yep.
There's at least 5 or 6 things in these rankings I don't understand at all. Maybe the most blatant that Tennessee beats UConn and their best win on their entire schedule is probably Texas A&M, and they moved up 4 spots, especially over Missouri, who they're playing this week, and we're going to get into for a minute, who lost a good game to Georgia. Missouri did not play a bad football game. Georgia's just it's on the road, and Georgia's better than them. Like, I told you it was a travesty that was a 15-point spread. If you told me before the game, hey, Georgia's probably 9 points better than Missouri in Georgia, that makes sense to me. I think they lost a game that made perfect sense.
Yeah.
And yet, honestly, I could easily make the case Missouri should not have moved down at all.
Yeah.
At all. When you've got Oregon State doesn't have really any great wins on their schedule, and Tennessee especially, I don't know. I don't know who thinks UConn is some superpower, but you move Tennessee up 4 spots. It's the biggest jump in the rankings.
Yeah.
The biggest jump, other than Oklahoma State. Oklahoma State and Kansas both moved up because they got big wins. But Tennessee moving up 4 spots, nothing. There is, I think, out of this top 25, there might be only a quarter of it that makes sense to me. Honestly, I have no idea what's going on.
Yeah, dude, it's insane. And I'm looking at the rankings right now. I mean, Oregon State at 12, I don't understand, man. I had them at 21 in my ranking, and maybe that's a little bit too low, but 12 is incredibly high, man. I mean, they beat Utah, which is a good win, but it's obviously not a great Utah team this year. And then you beat UCLA, who I always thought was overrated. You lose to Washington State, who's really taken a nosedive this year. Arizona is whatever. I mean, Oregon State, outside of the Utah win, has not really had anything to write home about, man. So that one I don't get. And then we talked about this last week too. It is an abomination for Oregon to be number 6 in the ranking right now. An abomination. It makes no sense when, again, you're looking at resume. And even if you're looking at purely eye test, you're telling me right now that Oregon's eye test is so much better than Texas and Alabama that you just throw out the resumes altogether. That makes no sense because eye test wise, Georgia, I would say, is way above Ohio State right now. And yet Ohio State's number 1 and Georgia's number 2. So eye test wise, I mean, I think it's a coin flip at best for Oregon against Texas and Alabama. And then you look at the resumes, man. Texas, what they've done this season, they lost to Oklahoma, but they beat Kansas State, they beat Kansas, and they beat Alabama, obviously. 3 top 25 wins right now, all 3 still in the top 25. Alabama, meanwhile, has just beaten LSU, and they didn't move up at all, which is crazy in my opinion. They beat LSU, they beat Tennessee, they beat Ole Miss. All 3 of those teams still in the top 25, still in the top 15 besides LSU right now. They lost to Texas. And Oregon beat Utah, and they lost in a close game to Washington. After that, Oregon's best win of the season is 4-5 Colorado or 4-5 Texas Tech right now. That makes no sense at all to me, to have just a Utah win, and then after that you're beating below 500 teams as your next best wins, and all of a sudden Texas and Alabama, who have been beating really good teams this year, still below them. I hate that. I really, really hate that.
I'm with you. I mean, I don't know. I think to try to do this hybrid thing and the way the finished product comes out is it makes no sense. I think the eye test thing with Oregon, I think you could definitely eye test them over Texas. If you're just going with Texas played some close games, albeit against good teams, and with a backup quarterback. Cool. Right. But the Oregon and Bama eye test, to me, it's 2 different styles of football. I get that Oregon's putting up 63 points on Cal, but you mean to tell me Alabama on the eye test right now, front to back, they look like one of the 4 best teams in the country.
They do.
I mean, they look. We said it on Monday. I think Bama is a substantial, like almost a pick'em threat.
Yeah.
If and when they play Georgia in the SEC title game, that is going to be an unreal game. Alabama's not the 8th best team in the country.
No.
I'm going to tell you right now. If we're eye testing this, if we're looking at their ability and the way Milroe's playing. No, honestly, if you're going resume, I said this on Monday or last Wednesday, whenever I said it. Ohio State 1 is cool with me, but if you're going to do that, put Florida State 2, put Washington 3,
right,
and then start working from there. And honestly, you go on resume, Louisville should be ahead of Penn State, Missouri should still be 12, Texas should be ahead of Oregon. I got way Iowa shouldn't even be ranked. I really don't get the method. They keep trying to say it's some combo of everything we're looking at, and we watch the tape and this, and that's cool. Look, I think the eye test can be a tiebreak. If you honestly think on the eye test that Penn State's better than Louisville, fine. It's 10-11. It's not wicked relevant. These things sort themselves out, and I think that's the biggest thing to remember. These things sort themselves out. They'll
sort them. Yeah,
they do. Florida State's going to play Louisville. Ohio State's playing Michigan. Michigan's playing Penn State. Georgia and Bama and Ole Miss and Oregon, Washington. If we get a rematch, I mean the one team really now in control, and apparently they're not, is Texas. This is why Texas also should be 6th. They have taken care of, other than the Oklahoma game, all the hard parts. And in the Oklahoma, you're going to give Oregon more credit for losing to Washington basically by the same margin that Texas lost to Oklahoma.
And Oregon barely beat Texas Tech. We always seem to forget that game because it was so early in the season. Texas Tech is 4-5 right now, and Oregon won that game, I think, by 3 points. And so we're docking Texas, basically, for beating Kansas State in overtime. Yeah, Oregon beat Texas Tech by 8.
We're basically saying, at this point, what they're saying, other than just eye test buffoonery, which we're kind of using and kind of not in certain spots, is Oregon's win at Utah is better than Texas's whole resume. That's pathetic. Yeah. That's pathetic.
What's the second best thing Oregon's done this year is lose to Washington by 3 points.
Tell me this right now. Alabama plays Utah, neutral field. Who's winning?
Oh, Alabama by probably 3 touchdowns, maybe.
Kansas plays Utah right now in a neutral field. Who's winning?
Kansas plays Utah?
Yeah.
I might go Utah on that one. But it's close.
It's at
close.
Least tight. Kansas State. Kansas State plays Utah on a neutral field.
Probably Who's Kansas winning? State. I'm probably taking Kansas State in that.
So you got two out of 3, and one of them you really, really thought about. Texas beat all 3 of those teams.
Yep. One of them on backup quarterback. I think that's so important that people seem to forget. It's a backup quarterback they had last week too. That matters so much, dude.
Even take it healthy with Quinn Ewers.
Yeah.
Okay, with Quinn Ewers, with or without Quinn Ewers. I mean, they beat Kansas State without him. Not that Murphy played great, but they got around it. You could argue Texas has 3 better wins.
Yep.
And I get it was at Utah, but Utah, there's stretches of games where they can't score.
And
by the end of it all, Utah might be out of these rankings.
And yeah, Alabama has LSU plays Utah. I'm taking LSU. Tennessee plays Utah. I might take Tennessee in that one. That's close. Ole Miss plays Utah. I'm taking Ole Miss. Again, Alabama has 3 wins too.
All three of them. All three of them better than the Utah win. If that game was in Oregon, it's only the Utah breaking whatever streak, whatever. They're literally saying, honestly, that the eye test and because they dominated Utah, cool. That the Utah win is better than anything that Texas or Bama has done. Anything.
And Texas beat Alabama.
And that's Texas beat Bama. So it really should be Texas, true. Bama, Oregon. Oregon should be number 8.
I agree. That's how it should be.
They just should. You want to eye test them over Ole Miss, cool, but Oregon should be 8. I don't. None of it makes any sense.
No,
it doesn't.
And we'll figure it out, and we have a loaded docket that we will figure out a lot, honestly, in this Week 11. And the main game, or at least the big game for me, Dalton, that we're talking about today. Actually, do you want to start off with the game that we are going to kind of breeze through really quickly because it doesn't have playoff implications? Or you want to start off at the top with the big one?
I would go there. Let's get the quick mention of that one because it's not a small game by any means. It just doesn't have the playoff implications because they both have 2 losses.
Sure. All right, so let's start off with that one. So the first game we're actually going to talk about today is number 13 Tennessee at number 14 Missouri, 3:30 p.m. on CBS. We kind of wanted to throw this in there because we're focusing a little bit on the playoff games, the ones that have the biggest implications of the playoff, but also we always want to talk about the games between ranked teams. And this is a really good SEC East game, man. I mean, this is really the battle for silver in the SEC East right now, with Georgia kind of being the top dog, especially after beating Missouri this past weekend. The next 2 best teams in the division, I would say, are Tennessee and Missouri. And again, not many college football playoff or even SEC championship stakes in this game. But I would also say the winner of this game has a pretty darn good chance of making a New Year's Six bowl game. So still some pretty big stakes when you take that into account.
No, totally, and it's actually especially for Tennessee because when you look at the way tiebreakers and they still have Georgia in front of them
right
next week, Tennessee has the bigger stakes in this game because they actually could still make the SEC title game. Missouri's pretty much done with that unless some crazy would. No, I don't even think it's possible. Tennessee has bigger stakes in this game. These are 2 really, really good football teams. I can't wait to see Luther Burden versus Kamal Haddon. That's as good a matchup as there is all weekend.
Haddon's I hate to burst your bubble, but Haddon is done for the year, unfortunately, the shoulder.
Oh, is he really? Oh,
yeah.
Oh well, there goes that.
I know. I was excited for that, too. I reminded myself, I was like, oh, wait. I forgot about the shoulder injury. He's done for the year.
So, that's a shame. That would have been one of the best.
Yeah.
Oh, man. Okay. Well, that's a problem for Tennessee now, isn't it? Against the Missouri team. I'll be honest with you. I had the deep dive this weekend on Missouri, Georgia, and Missouri didn't play a bad football game. No. They really didn't. It's just, I said it. It was a travesty that they were a 15-point dog. They're better than that. But if you told me before the game that Georgia was 9 points better than Missouri, that sounds about right to me. Missouri did not at all play a bad football game. The only thing, the biggest thing that came out of that for me is that just Carson Beck doesn't put the ball in danger. If you're going to beat Georgia, you need to find a turnover or 2. And it's so hard. Obviously, Stackhouse with the interception. Cook made a really, really bad throw on that one. But yeah, you do. You have to. Georgia, sometimes we've talked about their flaws, but you still have to play a darn near perfect game to beat them. Missouri wasn't perfect, but they didn't play a bad football game. Schrader was really good. Burton had the early touchdown. This is still a really darn good team. And honestly, I actually don't think they should have moved down, considering the two teams that moved ahead of them in that 12 spot that they had last week. They shouldn't even move down. Missouri is just wicked quality. The secondary was good. I think the 2 problems they had were just Georgia executes so well and they don't turn the ball over. And honestly, they kind of got beat with yards after the catch in the screen game. I think they didn't get beat over the top. We talked about a lot about Chris Abrams' drain, breaking up a couple of passes. He was terrific on the outside. Missouri, I expect Missouri to play a really good game in this game because they should feel no shame the way they played last week. You have to, it's especially at Georgia, you have to play a perfect game to go in there and win.
Oh, dude, absolutely. Yeah, so no Kamal Haddon against Luther Burden III. So that's one, elite matchup that we're not going to get, unfortunately. We are going to get another one, though, in James Pierce Jr. against maybe Javon Foster. That Missouri offensive line is honestly loaded across the board. Pierce, man, this season, 24.6% pass rush win rate, third in the country among edge defenders. Missouri, though, really solid protecting Brady Cook with an 17.6% pressure rate. That's 18th in the country. However, if Pierce can beat those tackles, and they have some good tackles there, especially Javon Foster, if he can, Brady Cook has just a 38.7 passing grade under pressure. That is 109th in the country. Brady Cook has had a renaissance season for him. He's been fantastic for Missouri, but when you get this guy under pressure, there are a lot of flaws, man. So I think James Pierce Jr., really, I think the biggest key for Tennessee in this game is make sure your best player, the true sophomore edge defender, James Pierce Jr., who I think could be a top 5 pick in next year's draft, as well as Luther Burden III. So if you're a fan of the 2025 NFL draft, we might have 2 top 5 picks, honestly, in this game. I think James Pierce Jr. is going to have a major role in deciding whether or not Tennessee can win this game.
Yeah, I agree with that. Georgia did a nice job in big spots of blitzing. I think you do have to blitz Missouri, and you do have to find ways to get there because their pass protection, Javon Foster and those guys are really good. And the times last week when he was clean, I told you he either took shots, he got the one big shot to Burden and he got some shots downfield, or took off running. His mobility is better than it was earlier in the season. He's over the knee injury he had earlier in the year, but I like Missouri in this game. I like them at home. I like the balance with Schrader. Haddon being out might be the difference in the game, to be honest with you. I mean, you still look, these receivers are really good, and they still made some plays even against Georgia at Georgia, and that game was tight really till probably about the last 8 or 9 minutes. I like Missouri. I think Tennessee's offense, they run the ball well, but at times they're inconsistent. As long as Missouri pass protects and doesn't give up big shots to Milton, I like them. I'm going to take Missouri 34-27.
Love it. I'm taking Missouri 31-28. I do think Tennessee's run game is the key for Missouri's defense as well. They've really done a good job running the football this year, Tennessee has. So Missouri's run D has to step up as well. But I'm taking Missouri in this one 31-28. I think without Haddon, that's a big loss for that secondary, especially when you try and defend one of the 3 best receivers in college football right now. And I think they keep Pierce at bay just enough. And I think Missouri wins this game, and they keep their New Year's 6 dreams alive. So we're both taking Missouri in that game. Now let's get to the games that have huge college football playoff implications. And this one is massive, Dalton. For me, at least, it's massive. I know for the rest of the country, it's massive. Number 3, Michigan at number 10, Penn State, noon Eastern time on Fox. The storyline in this game, this is the first time we're talking about Michigan in a previous show. It is, because they haven't played anyone this year, and there hasn't been a game that's worth talking about because Michigan, so far this year, has not played a top 25 team in PFF's power rankings. In fact, the closest game Michigan's played this year was when they beat Rutgers by 24 points. 24 points. That was the closest game Michigan's played this year. That all changes this weekend, man. You got Penn State, top 10 team in the country right now, in my opinion. The number 8 team in PFS power rankings at Penn State as well. I mean, Michigan, listen, they look like the most complete team in the country. They're first in team defense grade, and they're tied for first in team offense grade in the country. That's absurd. They look complete, but again, no other school in the country is top 10 for either of those metrics, for both, by the way. But right now, Michigan, I just think it's put up or shut up time. Now it's like, all right, who actually are you? Are you really the best team in the country, or was that just a product of you playing an incredibly weak schedule?
Yeah, I think Michigan, we were just talking about the rankings and straddling it. There is I don't think any better team to exemplify that than them, right? All of the point differential, the grading, the eye test says Michigan should probably be number 1. Mm-hmm. And the resume says they should be 5, or honestly, with as soft as it is, maybe lower.
Yeah.
Right? So we're going to find out. And the interesting thing is I'm not sure, other than McCarthy, and he's been great against these other teams, I'm actually watching the tape not 100% sure that their offense is like the number 1 offense in the country. It's graded number 1, But again, look who they've played. And we've got a Penn State team who we could both agree at the very least has a top 10 defense.
Easily.
Right? Maybe,
I would say top
maybe
five.
top
even,
five.
Man. Yeah.
Their defense is spectacular. This is going to be a rough and tumble game between two of probably the 5 best defenses in the country.
Agreed.
I think Michigan, that's where it starts. I think there are times when their offense now, they make so many stops. And I think they're more efficient than, say, like fast-paced and explosive on offense, and their running game isn't quite what it was last year. I think it's 4.6 yards. Maybe it's closer to 5 yards a carry, but it's not like explosive. Rankings and explosive runs by running backs take McCarthy scrambling out of it. Michigan's actually 94th in the country. So they don't make like huge plays in the running game. They're not as good run blocking as they've been. This offensive line, actually, it's still good, but it's not, I think, in past years when you could just almost hand them the Joe Moore Award. That's not the case this year, especially at tackle. I'm curious to see what Michigan at tackle, who their offensive tackles since week 6 are grading at a 61.4 against Penn State in a really, really good edge group who are 3rd in the country, Chop Robinson and those guys, in pass rush grade. There are some matchup things here that could make this very difficult. Penn State, biggest game of the year, two of the probably 5 best defenses in college football. The more I looked at this, as long as Penn State can just make first downs and not just go 3 and out every drive like they did against Ohio, this should look a lot like the Penn State-Ohio State game. It really should. The 2 really good defenses and 2 offenses trying to find it. I think Michigan is a 4.5-point favorite.
I think so.
I think this is going to be tight. It's going to be like, I don't know if it'll be tight score-wise at the end of it, but you're going to feel like just the presence of these 2 defenses more than anything.
I agree. And that's a huge point. I'm glad you brought up the tackles for Michigan, how they're kind of weaker this year and how Penn State's edge group is really good. Chop Robinson he got hurt in that Ohio State game pretty badly. He missed, I believe, the last 2 weeks now. Hopefully, James Franklin is hopeful that he can have him this Saturday. That is a huge deal for Penn State, because I agree, Chop Robinson could be a massive difference maker in this game if he is healthy. My biggest matchup I'm looking at, Dalton, is, not only just how real is Michigan, just how real is JJ McCarthy in terms of the Heisman Trophy, because right now he's tied for 3rd in Heisman odds at plus 850 according to DraftKings. But you look at that, and you look at his advanced metrics and how he's done this year, it's hard to argue, man. Right now he's a 91.4 passing grade. That leads all quarterbacks in the country right now. Again, they played nobody. That needs to factor in as well. So you look at what Michigan's done. Michigan, again, they've beaten everyone by at least 24 points. Every single team on their schedule, every one of their 9 games, they've won by at least 24. What does that mean? That means J.J. McCarthy has early exits. That means he's going to the bench in the 3rd quarter and not playing at all really in the 4th quarter. He has, this season, 10 dropbacks in the 4th quarter. That is tied for 238th among all quarterbacks in college football. Just to remind you guys, he's 238th in terms of dropbacks in the 4th quarter. There are 133 FBS schools, meaning almost every starter in the country, I think every starter in the country, and a lot of backups have more dropbacks in the 4th quarter than Michigan's starting quarterback this year. So I think Penn State's chance in this game is punching them in the mouth and saying, hey, you're not going to be able to sit on the bench in the 4th quarter. Like, you're going to have to go toe-to-toe with us this entire 60 minutes. And Penn State right now, you mentioned the defense, Penn State's 2nd in the country in EPA per pass on defense, only behind Michigan. So I think both Drew Aller and J.J. McCarthy, who kind of do carry these offenses right now, they're both going to struggle, man, because Michigan and Penn State have maybe the 2 best pass defenses in the country. Alabama I probably put up there as well, but Michigan and Penn State have been fantastic, and I think it's going to be tough sledding, man, for both McCarthy and Drew Aller in this game.
Yeah, and look, Penn State's run defense is incredible too. And the more I watched some Michigan tape, because this is, like you said, this is the first time this week that I've really watched any Michigan tape other than what we've seen on TV, because it's not much to see, right? But it's actually, it became more and more clear to me, and this is really the first time we could probably say this since Harbaugh's been at Michigan. your quarterback's your best player.
Right.
J.J. McCarthy's their best offensive player. And Roman Wilson's really good. He gets down the field. Blake Corum, not quite what he was last year coming off the ACL. Donovan Edwards is still a threat. But J.J. McCarthy's far and away their best player.
Easily.
He just and you normally you think of Jim Harbaugh in Michigan and all this, and you think dominant run game, play action passing. That's really not been the case. McCarthy has been, and to his credit, maybe this is the Heisman argument, is he's been at his best in just straight drop back situations. He's not being handcuffed. He's not, they're not trying to hide him. When they're best, they're actually at their best right now when JJ McCarthy just drops back and throws the football. Right? He's got Wilson, Edwards, Corum, the tight ends. It's a different dynamic. But this is a matchup where this is not a team where you want to just drop back and throw the football against, right? Ohio State, unless they were throwing Marvin Harrison, avoided it as much as they could. And I know McCarthy's better than McCord, but
they don't have Marvin Harrison.
Right. And Roman, and I really, really like Roman Wilson. He makes vertical plays for them, but he's not Marvin Harrison. So I'm curious to see where Michigan goes, especially you mentioned late in the games. If Penn State's defense does start to frustrate them, where do they go? Are they going to rip off 6 yards of carry and just keep getting first downs against a team with the best average depth of tackle in the country? Are they going to take shots at a really good secondary? It's Michigan. I just wonder if there's a point in this game where they're going to have to find an answer, because they really haven't had to find one all year. They have walked on to just about let's be real. They've walked on to every field they've been on, and they've been the better team from start to finish.
Easily, yeah.
Couple of times where it's like, the first half was closer than maybe. Like Rutgers plays legitimately good defense. We saw that against Ohio State.
And then they lost by 24. Yeah. So it's like.
And they still lost by 24, right? So I think Michigan, if McCarthy, I really think this goes for both quarterbacks. I think we've got two defenses that are actually the stars of the show. And I think we've got McCarthy, who is kind of where he's where Aller wants to be, right? Last year, J.J. McCarthy was Drew Aller. All right, when's this guy gonna start really being our quarterback, right? And it was in the TCU game, the semifinal, that he became that guy. And now he's just that guy. He takes vertical shots, he moves, he makes big plays. He's their best player. Drew Aller, all of a sudden, all we heard about all year from the beginning, hey man, this kid's special. This is the best kid Penn State's ever had, right? And I think it's kind of the old Russell Wilson thing. Let Drew cook, right?
Yeah.
The last 2 weeks, we've finally gotten that. After having like a bottom 10 ADOT the first 7 games, average depth of target, he's somewhere more like in the above average range the last 2. Let me give you another one. First 7 games, Penn State threw 17. Drew Aller threw 17 deep balls. The last 2 games, that's not right. Huh. The last 2 games, they've let him throw 14.
Wow.
They need to get vertical. Again, first 7 games. 4 big time throws, last 2, 7. You know what? They clearly decided, because even against Ohio State, they were trying to not let Aller be Aller. Just let it rip, man. Let it rip. You have the best pass protector in the country at left tackle. The receivers aren't great, but this guy can make special throws, and that's the one thing to their credit they've done the last 2 weeks. Let Drew Aller at least attempt to be special, because if he's not, they don't stand a chance in this game.
They didn't stand a chance in the Ohio State game, man, because exactly that. They just were scared of letting Drew Aller be the guy. The play calling was scared.
If you tell me you've got this 5-star special best quarterback we've ever had, let him be that.
Yeah.
Don't stop. I don't care if he's a freshman. I know his receivers are dropping balls. Just do it. Just do it. I'm gonna be honest, it's the only reason they won the Indiana game.
Yeah, dude, they literally were about to lose that Indiana game, and then he threw a magical ball down the sideline for the game-winning touchdown. Like, it was just like, that's just, you could have been doing that the entire game, and you wouldn't have been close with
his arm talent is like top 5 or 6 in the country.
Yeah, it's definitely.
He can make any throw. I honestly, there's times when he makes throws like that, and as big as he is, as thick as he is, and he like kind of moves, but he's not over the top, but he's a decent move. I get it. Like the arm talent, the build, the thing, even the release. I see a little bit of Andrew Luck.
Yeah.
I do. But you have to let him, you have to allow him to be that guy. For a guy with his arm in the first 7 games to have an average depth of target of barely over 7 is disturbing.
Yeah.
That's just a gross misuse of talent. If Drew Aller can be the best player on this offense, other than maybe Fashanu, you got a whole different thing, right? Because they only need, with their defense, they need, I know they're scoring 40 a week, which feels tilted. That doesn't even feel right. No. They really only need, with their defense, like 27. There's no reason he shouldn't be able to get him there.
Yeah, absolutely. And, dude, I mean, I don't know if you saw that tirade that James Franklin had a reporter when a reporter asked him, was like, hey, why not just chuck it deep more? And then James Franklin, like, ripped into him. And it's been kind of like a joke among Penn State reporters and fans of just chuck it deep and, like, making fun of that reporter. That reporter's kind of right in a sense as well, though, where it's like, dude, yeah, chuck it deep. Let Drew be Drew. Let Drew show off that cannon of an arm he has. Where right now it looks like Penn State's average at the target in those 7 games look like if I was out there at quarterback, where I can barely throw 20 yards downfield. That would be my average at the target if I was Penn State's quarterback. Drew Aller can throw a lot more than 20 yards downfield. I can promise you that. So I love that they're finally unleashing him, and hopefully they do in this game, because honestly, I don't think they stood a chance in the Ohio State game just off play calling alone. Like, if they let Drew try, maybe they would have won that game, because that defense was playing lights-out football against Ohio State, but they didn't even try, it felt like. So we'll see in this one. Dawn, I have to tell you, I sent this to our group chat earlier, of Penn State, according to ESPN FPI, 50.9% chance to win this game. Penn State's apparently the favorite in this game, according to ESPN FPI. Now, PFS power rankings say Penn State has a 37% chance to win this game, which I think I might side with ESPN over this one as a Penn State fan. But ultimately, my Nittany Lions, do they get over the hump? Do they take down maybe the best team in the country in Michigan?
No, actually, I think 37-40 sounds perfectly fine to me. That sounds right. In Penn State, it's still a road game for Michigan. I do think, sometimes there's games like this, especially tight games, where I think of how many scenarios, and I go, the one scenario where Penn State wins this game is if Drew Aller is special. Now, has he been special the last 2 weeks? Sure, but it was against Indiana and Maryland, so I'm not going there. I do think this game is going to be closer than I thought it would before I started watching the tape. So I'm going to take Michigan 24-20. I think there's more ways they can win. I think it's going to be a fist fight defensive battle for the most part, with some big plays mixed in. I'm curious who can get a little bit of efficiency going running the ball. I think Penn State's their offensive line's been a little better lately, but this is a different animal. I think you have two teams built very similar, and a reasonable enough difference at quarterback for me to still take Michigan. But I think they play their first tight game of the year. I'm going to go 24-20 Wolverines.
Yeah, I love that. It actually is pretty interesting how similar Penn State and Michigan are, except Michigan's just better at almost everything. Whereas, two really good quarterbacks, but obviously J.J. McCarthy's better than Drew Aller right now. Two duos in the backfield between Corum and Edwards and between Nicholas Singleton and Katron Allen for Penn State that have been disappointing this year, but still can break off a run when you need them to. Offensive lines, Penn State has been really disappointing this year. Michigan's been disappointing by their standards, but is still really good. And then 2 elite defenses as well. But again, Michigan, I think, is just better in every aspect. And unfortunately, I picked Penn State against Ohio State. I can't do it in this one, man. I picked Michigan to win it all before the season. I still think they're winning it all right now. I got Michigan 27-21. They'll survive. It'll be a punch in the mouth, and I'm excited to see, because you never know, man. When you punch a team in the mouth like this, like Michigan, maybe how do they respond? Because they haven't been punched in the mouth yet. It's just kind of been smooth sailing for 9 games. If you punch them in the mouth and they're not at home, it could be like, okay, well, what do we do now? Like, what's going on?
Penn State, I think it can be ugly all they want, but Penn State, I think if they want to win this game, you need 2 turnovers. You got to find turnovers.
Yeah,
I don't think punting the ball back and forth necessarily does anything advantageous for Penn State. They got to find a couple short fields.
They do. They definitely do. I don't think Penn State's going to be able to go drive, because I do think J.J. McCarthy will lead a couple drives to get Michigan in scoring position. Drew Aller against this defense, I don't know, man. So 27-21, Michigan survives, and for the first time this season, Michigan won't win a game by at least 3 scores, which will be a welcome sight, I think, for a lot of other college football fans right now. So very, very interesting game. Another game at 3:30 that we're going to talk about is number 18 Utah at number 5 Washington, 3:30 on Fox. And the storyline, at least for me, is, can Utah play the role of spoiler once again? Last year, USC, the only reason why they didn't make the college football playoff, was Utah. They lost to Utah in the regular season. They lost to Utah in the Pac-12 championship game. Now the Pac-12's top playoff contender is Washington, who won't be eliminated by any means with a loss here, but it would significantly hurt the Pac-12's chances of having a college football playoff team if Utah pulls off this upset. So Utah can kind of play the role of spoiler again, Dalton, and maybe cannibalize the Pac-12 once again.
Yeah, they're certainly going to try, and they're always a threat because they're well coached and they play reasonably sound defense. The story for me, actually, and I wanted to see Washington going into USC manufacture offense in ways other than just dropping back and throwing jump balls to Odunze, right? Just chucking deep balls into too high coverages, and they found it. Obviously, a lot of teams find their running game against USC, but you have to love what Dylan Johnson did last week, giving them balance: 26 carries, 256 yards, 4 touchdowns, 91.4 rushing grade, best player on the field by far. Yep. Right. And I think very often what teams get caught up in is with Utah is they're one of arguably the most physical team between them and Oregon State, I would say, in the Pac-12. Right. And I think Washington isn't always the most comfortable in situations where kind of physicality can get to them. You look at even the Arizona State game. Arizona State, they don't do much else right, but they are physical, and they gave them a lot of problems. So I think adding that second dimension for Washington helps them a lot in this game because, Utah is a team. Their secondary is the best part of their team. I believe they're in the top 20 in coverage grade. Yeah, they keep things in front of them. You're not going to drop back and chuck the ball over Utah's heads. They're going to make, if nothing else, what Utah does that spooks a lot of teams is they make you work for it. But I think if Washington got an elite offensive line, if you get Dylan Johnson going again, because I really think in their best games, they've been under center, and Dylan Johnson's ran the ball well, and Michael Penix is the best play action passer in the country. I think this gets forgotten because it's flashy and he makes the big throws against Oregon in big situations. But at their absolute best, run game, play action. If they need Penix to drop back and do that, cool, because he can absolutely do it. It'll be a first-round pick. But this is when they're at their best. And I think that's the matchup for me with a Utah team who, physical as they may be and they play with a lot of attitude, is 89th in the country in run defense grade. And honestly, the second one for me is Utah is not the same away from home. Right? Their 3 lowest graded games this year, both overall and on defense, are all 3 of their road games. Right? It's just not the same. It doesn't play the same outside of Utah. I'm curious if they can, even in a spoiler role, carry the physicality, carry that attitude away from the friendly confines there, because we know what Utah can do at home, which is why Oregon's win was so impressive. But on the road, that has not been the same team.
No, absolutely not. Yeah, it's a great point. It's not at Utah. And if it was at Utah, it'd be a much more dangerous game, in my opinion, but it's not. So, you mentioned it. The biggest matchup is simply Washington's passing attack against Utah's defense. I mean, Washington's passing game, you can make the argument just top to bottom, might be the most deadly in college football. You see right there, they're 5th in the country in EPA per pass on offense. Utah, though, 11th in the country in EPA per pass allowed. So Utah's defense has done a really good job defending the pass this year, but man, this is a different animal. This is a different animal you're going up against in Washington. Michael Penix Jr., right now the Heisman favorite, according to DraftKings Sportsbook. They have the second highest graded receiving core in the country as well, with 2 projected first-round picks. Check out Trevor Sikkema's mock draft at pff.com if you haven't already. 2 Washington receivers went in the first round of that mock draft in Rome Odunze and Jalen Polk. They both went in the first round. Huskies offensive line, 2.3% sack or hit rate allowed, so knockdown rate. That's the 3rd lowest in the country. And then you got Kalen DeBoer and Ryan Grubb at head coach and offensive coordinator. They are brilliant, man. 2 of the best offensive minds in the sport. However, Utah has 2 of the best defensive minds in the sport in Kyle Whittingham and Morgan Scalley, their defensive coordinator. So it'll be kind of a chess match between those 2 coaching staffs, which I'm very, very excited to see. And then Jonah Ellis, man, we haven't even talked about him. He has 12 sacks this season. That's tied with Laiatu Latu for the most among Power 5 defenders this year. So I'm excited, man. I think it'll be a little bit of a chess match between Utah's defense and how well coached they are and Washington's offense with all the superstars they have, and then also the superstar coaches they have as well.
Yeah, I think Utah needs to take some chances early to stay in this. The one thing with Penix I think there's one thing you found that can get to him is if you blitz him. But if you don't blitz him, here's another one: best passer in the country. To make your Heisman case. If you don't blitz him, he is the best passer in the country. If you do blitz him, the grade drops down around 40th. So, he doesn't want to move. When he moves to throw, right? And they have excellent top 10 pass protection, all that stuff. It's very hard to get to him. But I think Utah, the chess match would start for me, and they don't blitz much. Outside of their first game of the year against Florida, not a high blitz rate, just above 30%. They need to take some gambles. Send 5, send 6, man-to-man, make him get rid of the ball. Even with Jonah Ellis, you have Washington's offensive line is really good. If you just send 4 and sit back, he's going to kill you. Yeah. He's going to tear you apart. They have to. For me, Utah's defensive game plan should have some risk-taking elements. And if it doesn't work, then it doesn't work. But you have to find a way to slow this down. They are not winning a shootout. Utah put up 34 on USC. I don't even know if that would be enough.
Yeah.
I don't know if 34 most of the time isn't enough to beat Washington. 42 wasn't enough for Caleb Williams to beat him. So they need to take some chances. They need to force the action. If they sit back and send 4 and try to play just quarters and keep it in front of them, Penix is perfectly content to pick them apart.
Yeah, absolutely. So ultimately, Dalton, who are you rolling with in this Pac-12 game?
I like Washington a lot in this game. I think I love the balance they found last week. Utah's got a ton of flaws offensively. I mean, if they're not running for 300 yards, their passing game for the most part is kind of dysfunctional. And in Pac-12 play, their secondary has kind of struggled their way through. I don't think this will be as bad as the Oregon game. What was that, 35-6, was it?
Yeah.
But I'm not sure it'll be too far off of that. I gotta be honest with you. I think Washington finding the balance. I think Utah on the road is not the same. I don't think it's the same animal. The two things they need to do to stay in this game are run for a ton of yards. They just run, Sione Vaki and the run game. Bryson Barnes running himself. They need to run like crazy. And they need to attack. They need to blitz on defense. And they have not shown that they're going to attack like that on defense. Now, maybe that'll change, like you said, game plan specific stuff. But I like Washington a lot in this game. I think that was a big momentum boost they got last week going into USC, running all over them. Penix did not carry them in that game. He had 260, 2 touchdowns, I think only 1 big-time throw. But I think they're better in the moments when Penix doesn't have to carry them. He can obviously do it, but you don't want him to do it for 60 minutes. And I think they have a really good opportunity here to capitalize on that balance. I'm going to take Washington 41-14.
Wow. Big win for Washington. That's great. I like that, man. I got Washington winning as well. I only got them winning by 10, though. I got 34-24 final score. I think Washington's high-powered offense, man, is too much for practically anybody in the country. Even Utah, who has a really good defense, I just think it's too much for Utah to handle. So I don't think it'll be a blowout like you're suggesting, but I do think Washington's going to win this one by at least 2 scores. So next game we're talking about, the final 3:30 game that we're talking about, is Miami at number 4, Florida State, again, 3:30 on ABC. And the storyline is for Florida State the rest of the season is basically just don't screw up, man. We mentioned it before how Michigan has got a big game this weekend. Washington has a big game this weekend. We'll get into the Georgia game in just a little bit. Pretty much every top college football playoff contender has some massive games the rest of the season. Florida State is kind of just sitting pretty right now. They don't have another ranked team on their schedule. Miami, in terms of PFF's power rankings, is 40th. North Alabama is an FCS school. Florida is 30th. They just lost to Arkansas as well, who's had a really down year. And then the ACC Championship game, which is probably going to be against Louisville. And Louisville, as well as they played this year, Dalton, I mean, you look at the other conference championship games, I mean, Louisville might be one of the worst teams in the conference championship games that we're going to get this year. So I think Florida State really is just in the mode of, okay, we can't screw up. And while that that path ahead looks enticing and say, oh, wow, it's easy for them, if they lose one game, if they screw up one time, it's over. I don't think Florida State can get into the playoff with one loss, with how the rest of the landscape is shaking out right now. So it is very enticing that it's a kind of relatively easy path forward. But at the same time, man, there are some dangerous-ish teams. Like Florida can beat them if they have a good day. Miami in this game could beat them if they have a really good day, and obviously Louisville as well. So it is kind of a little dangerous for the Seminoles as well. Is that, hey, man, if you lose once, it's basically over for you.
Yeah, and I think there is not a single conversation in Florida State's locker room or on campus about, oh, this is easy going from here in, because the reality is they've got two rivalries and what is likely, if Louisville wins out, to be like the 9th ranked team in the country or maybe higher. But honestly, if Louisville wins out and you get some other teams, there's a chance Louisville could be ranked as high as like 7.
Yeah,
honestly, that's what you're looking at. You're looking at, hey, no, this schedule, we got two rivals. We got our two biggest rivals, and we have a top 10 team coming. This is not easy. I think we need to push back on this a little bit with Florida State, that they still have like, oh, just this, they have the cakewalk to the playoff. And I know the percentages and whatever else. I think I saw one yesterday that said they're the second most likely team to make the playoff, which for me makes sense because I would argue they should be number 2 in the country. But these are 3 dogfights they're gonna play with the softie in between. Look, Miami's defense is really, really good.
Yep.
Florida does weird stuff. Sometimes they play up and down depending on who they're playing. And look, Louisville's a darn good football team. I think we got to be over this thing. Now, would I take him over maybe the 10 in front of them? No, but that's why they're ranked 11th.
Yeah.
I mean, that's, on the resume, I could probably argue them up to 8 or 9. Probably could.
Yeah.
But it's not easy. This is not easy. Look, it's why we're previewing the game.
Yeah.
I don't think this is an easy game. Advantage that it's at Florida State. Advantage that Miami and ACC play can't win close games. But look, I'm not saying they're not the better team in all 3 games. But to sit here and think that they're playing, they're not playing Vanderbilt 3 times. Look, Miami's still 6-3, and they've shown flashes at times that they can get hot. Van Dyke can get hot. Florida's still only got, they just lost to Arkansas, but how Florida State goes. The game was tight last year, and Anthony Richardson was 9 for 27.
Yeah, and there's a chance that if they lose to LSU, Missouri, which I think they're going to do both, Florida going into that game, it's the last game of the season, Florida needs to win that game to make a bowl game. So that you got to add
that
too.
That game, if you're 5-6 going into it with Florida State,
yeah,
Billy Napier's job could be on the line in that game.
Right. He's pulling out every stop. Yeah.
And it's in the swamp, probably at night, if I were guessing. I don't know if they've announced the time yet.
I don't think they have, yeah.
We said it way back when they played Tennessee. You go into the swamp at night, that's an animal. That's a whole nother animal. Okay. This is not easy by any means for Florida State. They're not looking at it like it's easy. I guarantee you. The one thing Florida State needs to do, because I think the perception is, well, they're playing all these ACC teams and they're playing close, and these games are, what's going on here? And I go, okay, they need to be better in the first half, right? First half grading for their offense is 41st, and their defense is 34th, okay? In the first half, they're just playing like a good team.
Yeah.
But if you let the Avalanche, we've seen this probably 4 times, if not 5 already. If you let the Avalanche get going for Florida State, in the second half of games, offense second behind Georgia, 19th in defense, and their coverage grade in the Power 5 is only behind Georgia and Bama. In the second half of games, Florida State looks like the best team in the country.
Yeah.
Literally, like the best team in the country. They just need to. I would like to see them find it earlier, because that is a formula where you don't. What if Miami is up 10 at halftime? You don't want to be playing around with that, right? They already. They were down early to Pitt. They've done this in other games. BC, even LSU. Are they better than these teams? Yeah, but I do think that's the one thing from Florida State in this game. I would like them to get off to a better start, both for one, just outside perception, right? Everybody's looking at, well, what are you doing early and who's hanging around and this and that? Because the second half of every game, when they find it, I'm telling you, that's the best word I have for it. It's an avalanche.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden it gets rolling, and good luck. Good luck stopping it when it gets rolling. But whoever gets off to a good start in this game, I think That's where the script is going. And Miami, if Miami can take advantage of that, then you got a ball game.
Absolutely. Yeah, my biggest matchup I'm excited to watch is Florida State's offensive line against Miami's defensive line. Florida State's actually had a really good O-line this year. Right now, 5th in the Power 5 as a unit in terms of grading. They're also one of only 4 offensive lines in the Power 5 that's top 15 in both pass blocking and run blocking this year. Florida State's had a really, really good offensive line. Miami, meanwhile, though, is 6th in the country in pressure rate this season at well over 40%. Also tied for 6th in team run defense grade as well. So Miami's defensive line, man, is ferocious. They have Leonard Taylor III, the interior defensive lineman, who's currently a top 20 prospect on PFF's 2024 NFL Draft Big Board. And then also Ruben Bain Jr., the edge defender, is the 3rd highest graded true freshman in the country this season. He has been fantastic on Miami's defensive line and could be a first-round pick in 2026 or whenever he decides to come out, man. But Miami's defensive line is really good, man. If they get Jordan Travis under pressure, if they stop Trey Benson, man, it could be a long day for the Seminoles offense.
It could, but I like Travis's composure.
Yeah.
There is not like in a gritty, like, stand in there and stay in the ring and fight 12 rounds kind of sense. There's not a more fun quarterback to watch than Jordan Travis. And Miami blitzes a lot. They're going to be really aggressive. I fully expect them to try to make Travis make quick decisions, because you don't want Coleman and Wilson, assuming they're healthy, just flying down the field doing what they do, right? The one thing with Travis that he's good against the blitz. He's good when you don't blitz him. There's so much balance in his game. It's hard, other than to say sometimes they get off to slow starts, to find a weakness right now in Jordan Travis's game. He's not. I wouldn't put him as the number 1 quarterback in the country, but he's unquestionably in the top 6 or 7.
Easily.
Honestly.
Yeah.
Just so balanced, so consistent, so cool under pressure. And honestly, I believe I saw yesterday, I think if I saw it right yesterday, he's the best he has the best passing grade in the Power 5 into tight windows. He's not afraid of anything. He just, and I know it's easy to throw into tight windows when those tight windows are the guys who are 6'7" and 6'4" and can jump like Coleman. I mean, it makes the windows a little less tight, but still, the willingness to throw balls into those. There are guys who don't throw into any tight windows at all. Mm-hmm. I mean, honestly, I watched the Oregon tape this week, and we'll get to that. Bo Nix doesn't. I mean, there are no tight windows in that offense.
No,
those guys are running free, man. I mean, Jordan Travis makes difficult throws under pressure, and if anybody's equipped, because it's a style of defense in Miami that's hard to deal with. They blitz a lot. They're really aggressive. They fly to the football. If anybody would be unafraid of this defense, I think it's Jordan Travis.
Yeah. So Miami's got a good secondary too, man. So Cameron Kitchens is one of the top safeties, both in the draft and in the country. James Williams is there as well. So I think it'll be a really interesting matchup, that offense against that defense. And Jordan Travis, by the way, we interviewed. If you want to check out that interview, is a terrific kid. Ultimately, Dolan, who are you rolling with in this pretty big ACC game and pretty big test for Florida State?
I think Florida State's offense is the fun side of the ball, but I think the difference is what's going on with Miami's offense. Yeah. We've just seen Tyler Van Dyke, his first handful of games was off to such a good start, and it's cratered once they've gotten into ACC play. He missed 1 game, but his last 4 games, he's got 5 touchdowns and 10 interceptions, and in that same span, nobody else has more than 7 picks. He's a vertical passer, and he wants to throw balls into tight windows like that. He's got an absolute rifle, top 5 arm strength in the country. We talk about like Joe Milton and those guys. Tyler Van Dyke's just as arm strength, just filthy. He can chuck the ball 80 yards flat-footed, man. But I think you've got a really bad matchup with the way Van Dyke is playing right now. Since week 6, his adjusted completion rate is outside the top 100. The accuracy and the decision-making have fallen right off the cliff. And Florida State has the highest graded group of corners, at least coverage-wise, in the country. It's not a great matchup. Miami's defense can absolutely make a game out of this. Absolutely. They can, for as long as Miami's defense keeps them in it, they're a threat. But we're going to need to see the Tyler Van Dyke we saw the first 4 or 5 games as opposed to the last handful. And this is not the secondary you want to get right against. I think I think Miami's defense can make some things happen, but Florida State's so balanced. I'm going to take them 34-23.
Yeah, almost the same score. I have 35-20. I have Florida State winning this one. And, yeah, Tyler Van Dyke, man, I mean, I was willing to, start the train again on, maybe not a first-round pick like it was in years past, but I was thinking, this guy could be a day 2 quarterback, man. The way he's throwing the ball right now, and it is.
He's a guy. He reminds me. You remember Ryan Mallett?
Yep.
He reminds me a lot of Ryan Mallett. He's not going to move, and he's got an absolute rifle, and somebody's going to take him in probably the 4th round with the arm talent, but the decision-making is so rough.
Yeah. Yeah, rest in peace to Ryan Mallett, who is a legend of the game, honestly. But, yeah, Tyler Van Dyke, man, hopefully he can get turned around, man, because it has been a pretty rough stretch for him that he's had recently. So I got 35-20. I think Seminoles take care of business. They move one step closer to the college football playoff. Again, like you said before, though, man, I didn't really do a good enough job of saying, listen, it's not easy. It's not a cupcake. It is. You got some big games left on the schedule. But, again, if you lose once, I think you're done. I don't think they can get in with a one-loss team. We'll see how the rest of the landscape shakes out. Maybe we get some absolute madness. Maybe they can sneak in with a loss. But I don't know if the committee is going to be able to put them in with a one loss right now. But another huge game that we're talking about, another couple night games that we're talking about, is number 9 Ole Miss at number 2 Georgia, 7 p.m. on ESPN. Storyline for me is basically, can Georgia just pass another test, man? They beat their first top 15 opponent of the season this past weekend in number 12 Missouri, 30-21. Missouri, though, held the lead midway through the third quarter, and it was a one-possession game with just a few minutes left. So make no mistake, Georgia was on the ropes in that game. Now you play an even better team in Ole Miss, and they're trying to take down the defending back-to-back champs too. And if Ole Miss does, I know it gets a little wonky in the SEC West because Ole Miss lost to Alabama, but Ole Miss can make it a little interesting now. After beating Georgia, they can be legitimate college football playoff contenders, where right now we're kind of saying, oh yeah, maybe Ole Miss can make some madness happen. They beat Georgia this weekend. We have to take them seriously as a college football playoff contender.
Yeah, right now, what's the best way to put it? Ole Miss is an idea.
Yeah.
They're an idea, right? They're not like in it. They're like, oh, well, in theory.
Like Louisville. Right? It's kind of like, oh, maybe something happens.
Yeah. Well, and I think the path is more simple for Louisville because they'll get to play in a conference title game. There's a 95% chance Ole Miss is not even going to be able to. So
maybe like Penn State. Penn State, I think, is a better comp where it's like, if they beat Michigan,
Ole Miss could win this game and still not play in a conference title game.
Yeah. So it's like Penn State too.
The problem
is the same way. I think Penn State's a better comp for that. Then honestly,
it's an idea, and it's an idea that would have to obviously start this week. Now, if they win this week, how high do they go? Would you put them at 6, 7? Beating Georgia's no small deal. I mean, what is Oregon? By the way, they're doing the thing. Does Oregon go to 5? I mean, I don't know. I don't know how this would work. So if Ole Miss were to win this game, but regardless, they still have to do it. Let's see if we can find a way for them to do it first. And the thing I look at is Jackson Dart. Okay, when you watch Ole Miss comes out, Lane Kiffin comes out with something different every year, man. Yeah. It's crazy. It's like sometimes it's the run game, sometimes it's trick plays. I remember at FAU it was trick plays like crazy every week. You had like 5 trick plays in the book. Their offense this year kind of operates similar to Georgia. Let's run the ball. Let's get to the play action. Let's not drop back like too much unless we need to, right? Mm-hmm. And let's take shots down the field when it's warranted. And I think the one thing for Ole Miss, Jackson Dart, I found a fun number. Best passer in the country at or outside the numbers, out towards the sideline. Okay? So I think if you're going to attack Georgia, and it's been like this since Kirby Smart was at Alabama, you do it on the outside vertically, right? Stay away from Malachi Starks. They run a lot of man coverage or kind of man variant-ish things on the outside. Ole Miss maybe has some opportunities here to get outside the numbers vertically, which is what they've been doing this year. It's kind of contradictory to all the trends we've been seeing in football with like Kyle Shanahan and everybody throwing the ball right over the middle, right behind linebackers. Lane Kiffin's kind of zigging instead of zagging, right? So if they can first of all, they got to run the ball well. Judkins and everything's set up for Ole Miss in the run game. If they get the run game going, they get to the play action, right? Because Missouri, like take last week, Missouri's not the biggest play action team. It's in there, but it's not like the bread and butter. Their bread and butter is like pass protection, drop back, read the defense and let it rip, right? Ole Miss wants to go run game, play action, shots down the sideline, okay? Get everybody in, get the safeties in, or get to a single high look, and then attack out here.
Yeah.
If they can do that, they've got a shot. Because I don't think Georgia's corners they're not elite. The one elite player in the secondary is Starks. And if you can make them go single high with Starks back there by himself in the middle, he's got range. If he's got enough range to get all these balls, like Kyle Hamilton did at Notre Dame, well, then just Malachi Starks might beat you then if he's that good. Yeah. But they're gonna take their chances on the outside. I think they like their chances in these one-on-one matchups. And Jackson Dart, like I said, not a better passer in the country outside the numbers this year. So that's the fun one for me. Is that was a problem for them against Bama. They didn't complete a single deep ball. They need to create. Lane Kiffin has to find the big plays because Kirby Smart's going to look at Bama's game plan and go, "Oh, I'm just going to copy that." What are we, or if he doesn't, I don't know why he wouldn't, because that was the one game they hit no deep shots, and I know they had some guys hurt, but they were a mess in that game because of it.
Yeah, and a guy that I think Georgia really needs to account for, Trey Harris, man. There's some games this year where he looks like one of the best receivers in America, especially this past weekend against Texas A&M. 11 catches for 213 yards and a touchdown. He had other games like LSU game. He had 8 catches for $153 and a touchdown. I know it's Mercer, but still in the Mercer game, he had 6 catches and 4 touchdowns against Mercer. That's ridiculous. So Trey Harris, I think, he had a few one-handed catches against Texas A&M that were filthy. One of them that counted, he got in bounds. The other one, Dart kind of overthrew him in the end zone. He still made a ridiculous one-handed catch out of bounds. He is a really talented receiver. I think one of the most underrated receivers in the country. My biggest matchup, though, is Quinshon Judkins against Georgia, because I think Quinshon Judkins, I had him as a number 2 running back in the country entering the season after Blake Corum because of what he did as a true freshman. Kind of a slow start for Quinshon Judkins in his sophomore season, but he's picked it up, man. And since week 5, he has 436 rushing yards after contact. That is 4th among all running backs in the country. Georgia is only 59th in terms of average depth of tackle in run defense this year. So I would say that Georgia's strength, the defense is still elite, don't get me wrong. But what we're used to talking about with these Georgia defenses in years past was you got first-rounders in the linebacking core and you got first-rounders on the defensive line, and the secondary is really good, but really it's the front 7 where it's just like, this is the best we've ever seen. This year it's not really like that. I think the secondary is really good for Georgia, but elsewhere, there are some vulnerabilities on this Georgia front 7, and so many people will say, okay, wait a minute, you're saying Quinshon Judkins should carry them to victory. Well, I remember when you guys talked about Ray Davis for Kentucky and him having to carry the Wildcats to victory, and Georgia shut him down, and they shut down Kentucky in that game. Difference, I think, in this game, though, is that Kentucky could not throw the ball. They had no threat of throwing the ball with Devin Leary. There's a threat in this game of Jackson Dart, who's played really well this year. Trey Harris, like I mentioned before, has played really well. They got a really good receiving core outside of that as well. You can't stack the box against Ole Miss because Lane Kiffin will take shots downfield and beat you deep. So if you all of a sudden have light boxes, Quinshon Judkins might be able to run a little wild on the Bulldogs this year. So I think it's a little different than the Kentucky game, and I don't think Georgia will be able to stack the box and just take away Quinshon Judkins, because if you do that, it leaves you vulnerable in the secondary.
You're absolutely right. And Kentucky wasn't a threat throwing the ball, so it really didn't matter. You're right. Judkins has to set up this whole thing.
Yeah.
Schematically, I think Missouri schematically had really good ideas for about 2.5 quarters, and then they kind of started to run out of them, and turnovers got to them. This like X's and O's is the most fun game because you've got Kiffin against Kirby.
Yep.
And I think Kiffin timing up the play calling for when he sees one high, when he sees 2 high, because we've been over that. When they go 2 high, if they can find a way to run the ball against 2 high, you mentioned it. Georgia's D-line this year is not elite. It's not an elite unit. They're good players, but it's not like years past. There's not Jalen Carter and Nolan Smith and Jordan Davis and these monsters up front. Maybe in a year or two they will be, but not this year. If they can set it up with Judkins, if they can then You set it up, you run. Because, look, Missouri ran the ball well. Cody Schrader, honestly, was the most consistent player on their offense last week.
And Cook ran the ball, pretty well on them, too. Cook had a few plays where he got outside.
And he did. And, look, Dart's mobile. Dart is probably about the same amount of mobile as Brady Cook is. Maybe even a better threat in the read option game.
Yeah.
You have to have an element of quarterback run. You have to be able to set up – they have to set up the play action. I think first and second down – and good field position for Ole Miss is massive in this. Get yourself in play action shot situations. If they come out the first play and Judkins runs for 7 yards, the engine gets rolling. But it can't get rolling if they get stuffed on first and second. They don't want to throw the ball on 3rd and 10. They're not particularly like Dart here and there, but that's not their game. Lane Kiffin, everything is about Lane Kiffin schematically setting things up, setting up safeties and creating space. Okay, especially this year when he gets single high, they are then going outside away from the single high, especially if they get like a cover one man coverage type of look in this game. They don't throw the ball like it's not like when they see 3 deep, they don't really throw the ball up the seam. I'm telling you, they go outside towards the sidelines and keep things away from danger. They're not one of these teams that throws the ball over the middle of the field, right? If Kiffin finds the groove, they've got a shot. But they have to be good on first down, especially with Judkins, and really time it. He's got to time it up right. And honestly, look, we've watched Lane Kiffin for years and years, and that was on. I got to see him when he was coaching even at FAU. I was just for as much as they ripped him for the Tennessee stuff and the Raiders and everything before that. I was so blown away every week with the play calling.
Yeah.
And it's the same way. They lost to Bama and they only scored 10 points and didn't hit any deep shots, and he just keeps finding ways to score boatloads of points. Some weeks I had him against Auburn. They ran the ball a ton against Auburn. They just outran Auburn when Auburn wanted the game to be that way. They just find ways. And if he can find his way, starting with Judkins, to get play action shots, they could be living right in this game.
Dude, the comparison I just thought of in my head, and tell me if I'm wrong in saying this, Lane Kiffin is a lot like what people wanted Josh McDaniels to be. Where it was like, it didn't work out. It didn't work out at all the first time. It was a complete freaking disaster. I mean, Lane Kiffin even had a shot in the NFL, and that went horribly. He had a shot at USC. It went really bad. And then kind of, took his lumps. He went coach under Nick Saban, was the offensive coordinator there. McDaniels did the same thing under Belichick, 2 legends of the game they coached under. Kind of got their feet going again. You're saying, okay, maybe now it might work. And McDaniels, again, crashed and burned because he didn't change at all. Lane Kiffin, though, is doing well. I think he's learned from his mistakes in the past. So I think, that's the comp I would make, is it's kind of like what we hoped Josh McDaniels would do, where he's like, oh, I can't do that anymore. And he didn't really do that in his second stint with the Raiders. But yeah, Lane Kiffin's kind of like that in my opinion. But listen, man, that Ole Miss offense, I mean, they can beat you with Judkins. They can also put up 55 points on you like they did against LSU as well with Jackson Dart in that passing game. So it's a dangerous offense because you don't know. They could beat you in any single way. So I think Georgia is a little bit on upset alert this week. But ultimately, Dalton, will the Bulldogs lose their first game since the 2021 SEC championship game? And will Ole Miss become a playoff contender? Or will it be kind of business as usual for the Bulldogs?
I do absolutely think they're on upset alert. But I think I look at this game very similar to last week's game. I think Ole Miss can beat them. I think they can absolutely keep this within a score. They can win the game. Ole Miss could win this game.
Yeah.
Like a couple things break right, execute well, whatever. I think the two differences for me are Ole Miss's major weakness is in run defense, and they just need to they need to be physical with Georgia, and that's going to be hard. And the other thing for me too is Carson Beck just doesn't turn the ball over. He doesn't give you any opportunities to just he doesn't blow it. So those two factors, I think it's very similar to me. Like as it was against Missouri, I think Ole Miss keeps this a game. I think at the end of the day, Georgia are just right now the masters of not giving it away. So I'm going to take Georgia similar to last week. I'm going to say 31-24.
Okay. I got 35-24. I got Georgia winning this game as well. I think Judkins and Dart and those receivers, they keep the Rebels alive. It's a close game, and I think you mentioned it, man. We didn't even talk about the other side of the ball. Carson Beck is playing such good football right now. Such good football. Bowers, again, might be able to go. in this one. There are reports that he's running in practice. He's doing a little bit more every single day. There's a chance he plays in this game, and if he does, that is a major addition for Carson Beck, who's already playing lights out football even without Brock Bowers. If you add the best tight end maybe in college football history to that offense once again, man, it could be scary. I think Carson Beck is the most underrated quarterback in the country right now. I put him in the top 5 to 6 Heisman candidates right now, and I just think it'll be too much for Ole Miss, but should be a good game. I think Ole Miss definitely can pull this off. Don't get me wrong. They can definitely pull this game off. So I wouldn't be surprised if that happens. But I do think Georgia wins this game by 2 scores. But last game we're talking about, 10:30 p.m. I'm going to stay up for this game. I know a lot of other people are hopefully going to stay up for this game as well. USC at number 6 Oregon, man. This game is going to be fun. Caleb Williams against Bo Nix. Probably 2 first-round quarterbacks. And my big storyline, this is USC's first game without Alex Grinch, without the looming shadow of an Alex Grinch defense, because Lincoln Riley just fired him. We talked about him in the Monday episode of some guys that we think he should hire to replace him. They lost by 10 points to Washington, even though they put up 42 points. They've been outside the top 75 of EPA per play in 4 of 5 years with the partnership of Lincoln Riley and Alex Grinch. So this is a move that had to happen. Now Sean Nua and Brian Odom are the co-defensive coordinators. And, man, this is a brutal game to be thrown in as your first game as a defensive coordinator. Oregon's offense, man, is only behind LSU in terms of EPA per play this season. Only behind LSU, who is blow-torching everyone. I mean, they put up 28 on Alabama. For 28 against Alabama is like 50 on anyone else, basically. So it's just really going to be a tough, test for those two in their first game. And then Bo Nix could be on his way to a Heisman Trophy this year too, man. He leads the country with an 85.1% adjusted completion rate this year. So pretty brutal first game for the new interim defensive coordinators for USC.
Yeah, it sounds funny. Obviously, that's going to be the overarching story, is if USC's defense has any life. And to me, part of that, for as much as we have the flash of the 2 quarterbacks and all of that, I'm going to lean away from that from because that's going to be what everybody talks about all week. The story for me is these 2 offensive lines. Oregon's just filthy. I went over the numbers on Monday, but I'll say them again. Right now, their pass pro grade is the best of any Power 5 team in the last 5 years. And their pressure rate, 9.4%. When usually the best teams in the country hover around 13, 9.4% is far and away the best that we have seen since PFF has been charting college data since 2014, 2015. It's insane what Oregon's offensive line is doing. And honestly, USC has a very good offensive line too, okay? They're 11th in the country in pass protection. Caleb Williams is this year the best quarterback in the country in a clean pocket, which is really the stable part. We talked about the pressure stuff and what he's done earlier in the year under pressure, giving the ball away. Now it's been a little bit better, but the clean pocket part is stable. Best clean pocket grade in the country. 20 touchdowns, no interceptions, 1 turnover-worthy play. If Caleb is clean and he's actually making reads and kind of playing quarterback in a classic sense, just about unbeatable, to be honest with you. So you got Bo Nix, who 10th best grade in clean pockets in the country, completing 81.8% of his passes, which is gross, and an adjusted completion of 86%, which is best in the Power 5. He ranks only behind, I think, Jacob Zeno at UAB under Trent Dilfer. And the craziest part, when he's in a clean pocket, Oregon has dropped 19 balls. 19 balls, the most in the Power 5. So, when you talk about Bo Nix is being kept clean more than just about anybody ever, and he's making all the throws, I want to see if either of these teams can get a pass rush going against these 2 offensive line and these 2 quarterbacks when they're not touched, playing just at an incredible level. If one or the other gets a pass rush going, we start talking about, I think, the needle leaning that way for one team or the other. I know Oregon's got the advantage in the run game, although you still have Marshawn Lloyd. You still have Caleb Williams. USC's run game is capable. I think this game is about offensive line play. And if neither of them get a pass rush, you're going to see another 52-42 this week, because there's no questions about USC's offense. Caleb Williams and their offense and their receivers alone, they could win this game. if their defense is anything better than it was last week or it's been all year, yeah, I think they do have a chance. But if either of these teams gets a pass rush going, then that team's offense will be the one in trouble.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, I think you took the words out of my mouth. I was going to talk about the pass rush for Oregon, what I think is really important because, like I mentioned, Caleb Williams, tied for second in passing grade when kept clean. That's what you see right there. But you're right. He is the best overall grade when kept clean. He also has a 36.7 grade under pressure, which is 120th among FBS quarterbacks. And Oregon has a pretty good pretty good pass rush. They're right around 37% on the season, 16th in the country. USC's got a really good offensive line as well, but Caleb does like to hold on to that football. So if they get him under pressure, it could be trouble for USC's offense. And also another thing to keep in mind in this game, USC's already played 10 games this year. This very well could be one of the last 2 times that we ever see Caleb Williams in a college uniform, because if they win this game, they can extend that, and they actually would be one of the 2 teams in the Pac-12 championship at the moment if they win this game. But if they lose it, you got UCLA next week, and then that's it, because they're going to play in a bowl game, maybe not even probably not a New Year's Six bowl, especially if they lose this game. And then I don't think he's going to play in that game. He's going to be the number 1 pick in the draft most likely.
I would not think he's touching a bowl game.
He's not. So this is really, the UCLA game is, again, that's really could be his last game, but this is his last huge game, man. This is right now UCLA is not ranked. Oregon is a playoff team right now. My biggest matchup or storyline or whatever is, can Caleb Williams one last time pull a magic rabbit out of the hat and just make it happen, which I think he can. I think he very well can, and I'm kind of been waiting on it, and I'm hoping he goes out with a bang, man, because it would be cool to see his career kind of end with one statement victory like this one that he could have this week. But if he doesn't get it done this week, you play UCLA next week, and that's probably it for Caleb Williams in a college uniform. And we talked about on Monday how I think he's one of the biggest wastes of talent that we've seen in college football in at least a decade. It would be sad for him to go out with a couple losses, but we'll see, man. Maybe he's got a little bit more magic for us before he heads on to the NFL draft. But ultimately, Dalton, who do you have winning this game in this Pac-12 after dark shootout should be?
It does feel like there needs to be some sort of redemption for him, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It just kind of in a gut feeling sense. It feels like, kind of those images we have right now of him against Notre Dame and him against Washington shouldn't be the lasting images. I'm going to take Oregon. I think the balance is big time. Obviously the run game is the foundation, and they're just so good on the offensive line. It's crazy. It's just so stable. It's elite football. They play elite football every single week.
Yep.
Almost, especially offensively. It's not like we've seen it a little with Washington. We see it like Florida State half to half, but nobody plays more consistent football than Oregon.
That's why number 6.
Yeah, and I get the eye test, and we can argue about them 6, 7, 8, whatever. But there has not been a more, maybe other than Michigan, but they haven't played anybody.
Yeah.
Oregon, in a much better conference, has played much more consistent football. I'm going to take him. I'm going to take him in another shootout. I do think Caleb shows up well in this game, possibly well enough to win it. Let me get Oregon 45-42. I'm going to take another shootout. I think Oregon's defense, I think it's a good defense. I think we've seen him against Penix. I think Caleb has there will be opportunities for USC to win this game, but the balance of Oregon is the difference. And again, I can't say it enough. This offensive line is doing historically great things, man. And I get Bo Nix. Bo Nix should be. We've talked about it. Penix and him are 1-2 in Heisman right now, I think, and it'll probably finish that way. But Bo Nix, he can stand back there and play around a chest, man. It's crazy. When you talk about he's standing back there by himself 90% of the time. It's unbelievable how well their offensive line is playing. And I think they're the difference in this game at the end of the day.
Yeah. I'm picking Oregon too. The vibes to me feel like a USC upset is in order. Just when everyone's counting them out and everyone's counting Caleb out, one last time he pulls out. But I'm taking Oregon. I agree with you. I think they're the better team. I got 38-35. I also have a 3-point game, but yeah, I want to pick USC.
It makes more football sense to pick Oregon. I'd be going against pretty much everything I know and look at all the time, picking against them. But
it does feel like a vibes like Caleb won last time, man, right?
Like he just this whole year we don't have anything signature. It's just like, oh, he's really good, and we've watched them struggle with Arizona and lose the two big games and it just. And actually, 3 big games they lost. I forgot they lost to Utah, too. And the only one I can pin on him is the Notre Dame game.
That's the only one he lost.
Utah was their defense. The Washington game was their defense. I mean, they still put up 42 points. I think you have to remember when watching this game, everybody's going to pick Oregon. You got to remember that's Caleb Williams, man. That's a threat. Yeah. He's still going number 1. We can talk about whatever. He's still going number 1. All right. And when you're playing the number 1 pick in the draft, you don't take that lightly. Oregon could absolutely. There's a road where they could lose this game.
Absolutely.
Sure. If the O-line's a little off, like they were against Washington, if Nix is a little bit off, if Dan Lanning's a little bit off, these are the things. Any of these things can happen. And when it's still with USC, and we both picked Oregon, but with USC, you don't have a ton of margin for error. Because any ball can go for an 80-yard touchdown. Yep. And I'm going to throw in Zachariah Branch on these kick returns too, because he way too often turns the games in their favor with these kick returns. There's a lot of danger here for this game. This is not a cakewalk either for Oregon. People think USC's down in the dumps and all that. It's not a cakewalk. This is going to be a ball game.
So Dalton, we both picked USC to lose by 3. You want to guess what the spread is right now for this game?
Is it 3? I don't even know. Is it? No, it's something way bigger. Isn't it double digits?
Try 5 times that. 15 points.
Yeah, no. I'm not taking anyone. I'm not taking anyone to beat Caleb Williams by 15. I'm not doing it. And look, we've been on him. We've been on him. We called it going into the Notre Dame game that the pressure stuff and the turnovers were a problem, and their defense was a problem. Notre Dame was the only one to do it, right? No, they're not losing. No, they're not losing by 15.
That is an insane line.
That's the Missouri game all over again for me from last week. They're not. If they lose, if they beat USC, effectively you're telling me they're going to beat USC by 3 scores.
Basically, yeah.
Which tells me 2 things. One, the spreads, Vegas still thinks that Oregon's better than Washington. I don't think we can definitively say that. Mm-hmm. I'm over this thing where Oregon looks better than Washington. Why? I'm over that. And 2, I'm not picking anybody. You mean to tell me so Washington beat them by 10? You're still telling me Oregon's better than Washington for sure for some reason when they lost to them, and I'm not picking Caleb to lose by 3 scores. I'm not doing it.
Washington's favored by 9.5 against Utah. I feel way better about USC pulling this off than Utah, dude. Way better.
Both ways, nonsense.
Ole Miss is 10.5 point dogs to Georgia too. I mean, I can see a world, but it's like
I don't hate that one. I don't hate that one as much because that's roughly about how they beat Missouri. I don't hate that one as much. But I'm not until we see it. Unless they just run for 400 yards and USC's defense is shot. That's the only way I see that being that wide.
Dude,
I'm not taking Caleb Williams to lose by 3 scores.
No, 15 is. That's what I'm saying, man. It's just the vibes feel like he has been the most ridiculed player I can remember, man. I mean, every single thing people hate this guy. I think
he still should probably, by the numbers, like just pure numbers and things they vote on, he still could probably be 3rd in the Heisman race.
Yeah. If his team wasn't losing 3, absolutely. But I just think one last time, I could totally see him giving a big middle finger to everyone who has been doubting him this whole year.
Like he needs some redemption.
Yeah, like it needs to happen.
You're right. There hasn't been a big win this year. They've beaten all the teams they're better than, and they've lost to the team, and even Utah or whatever. We can say Utah's better than them. Sure, they beat them 3 times in a row. You're right. There does need to come some redemption, and I don't think it would come against UCLA. I'm with you. Now, I think this game will be tight. I do. I just think I do think the balance is the difference, but I'm not taking Caleb Williams to lose by 15, 17, 15 and a half. No, I'm not doing that. No.
Yeah.
How many times has he lost like that in his career?
They lost by 28 to Notre Dame.
And the Pac-12 title game was ugly too.
Both, but I don't think it was 50. Was it 15 last year? They lost by 2 to Utah. They lost by 10 to Washington. And then the year before, I don't believe they – I'm looking right now. But the year before, I believe they only lost – they lost to Utah.
The only one I thought was the Pac-12 title game that might have been a little more spread than that.
They actually lost to this is 2021, sorry. So they lost to Utah, obviously, last year by 23 in the Pac-12. Yeah, so that was the only one. And that game just got away from them, honestly. That is what happened.
Yeah,
but
they ran out of that game.
And Caleb got hurt. I forgot about that. Caleb got hurt, and he was, like, hobbled the entire second half. So.
To be honest with you, I'm not even sure at Oklahoma that he ever lost by that much.
Yeah, I'll have to look. But, yeah, I just –
Yeah, 20, that's the Pac-12 title game. And I'm curious at Oklahoma if he ever even lost by that much.
I don't know. I don't think he did, man.
No, 2021 Oklahoma. I'm looking at. He lost one to Baylor by 13, and he lost to Oklahoma State. The 2 games he's lost in his career by that much, and we're just going with it. This is where we're at with Oregon. Okay.
That's if you're a betting man. USC plus 15. And honestly, I don't even know what the money line is. I'll have to look that up. Money line is probably juicy for USC in this one, dude. Very juicy.
Plus 15? You probably get it at least. You probably get it 5-1.
Yeah, probably, right? And then I don't know, dude. I have a sinking feeling that I'm wrong on this game. I have a sinking feeling that you and I are going to come on the show on Monday and be like, damn it, I wish I did it. I wish I went against everything. Yeah, so USC is plus 575 right now in the money line.
Well, so, we've picked all the favorites.
Are you switching?
Something. Yeah, we've picked all the favorites. We should have each picked probably one dog. Something's going to get wacky this week.
I should have.
It's either going to be that game or it might be that Michigan game.
Yeah, I hope, dude. I hope
it might, because you've got a game in that Michigan game that just could be tight just because of style. Styles make fights.
Yeah,
I don't. Here, do you want to each, before we go, call out one that's the most likely at least?
Yeah, you want to go first? You want to say yours first?
You go ahead.
Okay, I'll take USC. I don't think Penn State can do it, unfortunately. I do want to call out, I think Ole Miss has a shot. I think they have a shot at this game. I think that's one where that's a really sneaky one in my opinion. So I'll say USC is my most likely one, but I do want to throw in Ole Miss as my runner-up.
I'm just gonna do it for the fun of it. I'm gonna say Penn State's got a real shot in that game. I think styles make fights, and I don't think their style is that they're gonna get blown out. You know what? Maybe Drew Aller does it for you. I think that game will be tighter than people think. When I watched the Michigan tape, I was like, you know what? Penn State could compete with this. Yeah, they could do it.
I'm hoping, man. I know you. So hopefully the opposite happens, where I picked Penn State to beat Ohio State, and you said Penn State really, I just don't see it. And hopefully it's the opposite now, where I don't pick Penn State to beat Michigan, and you think they have a shot. So hopefully it happens. But yeah, it's going to be a great Saturday of college football. We have some awesome games on the docket. So make sure you guys subscribe to the channel for Monday's episode. We haven't decided yet what we're going to do, but definitely trivia. Dalton rebounded. I had 4 for 5, man. That was pretty good. So we're going to do another trivia, obviously, talk about some other stuff in college football, and then another preview show going into week 12 of college football. So a lot of stuff coming up the rest of the season, man. So I'm super excited for week 11 of college football. So thank you guys for tuning in. For producer Eli back there, for Dalton Wasserman, I'm Max Chadwick, and we'll see you guys next time.